Senegal's president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, has just pulled the ultimate political plot twist. The man who rose to power on firebrand Pan-Africanist promises, swearing he'd kick France out of Dakar and finally break free from colonial chains, is now shaking hands and smiling with Emmanuel Macron in Paris. Yeah, you heard that right. The guy hailed as the next Ibrahim Traoré is suddenly France's new best friend. Barely a year in office, Faye went from France, get out, to France, let's do business. And he's not shy about it either. On August 27, 2025, Faye stood next to Macron and said, and I quote, "This breakfast allowed us to reaffirm our shared commitment to strengthening bilateral relations in areas such as investment, trade, defense, and security." Defense and security with France. The same France he promised to expel. So what happened? How did Senegal's liberator turn into Paris' house guest? Let's rewind. Faye stormed into office in 2024, Senegal's youngest president at 44, backed by the fiery PASTEF party. He rode a wave of youth anger at French companies siphoning off Senegal's fish, phosphate, oil, and gas while poverty lingered at home. He promised a clean break, renegotiating contracts, ditching the CFA franc, even flirting with a new currency. Then came the big one, shutting down French military bases. The Wakam camp, the Dakar airport base, gone by 2025. It was electric. Social media crowned him the new face of African resistance. Crowds chanted, "Africa for Africans." For a moment, Senegal looked ready to join Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger in a new front of defiance against Paris. But fast forward 1 year and Faye is in the Élysée Palace talking about shared commitments. That's not a pivot, it's a betrayal. He told Senegal he'd cut the cord, and now he's tightening it. So let's be real, this isn't about cooperation. This is neocolonialism in a fresh suit. Faye may say Senegal needs French investment, but Africans have heard this song before. The question now is, was he ever serious about liberation, or was the revolution just campaign fuel? France's economy is in freefall. As of August 2025, the country is drowning in 3.3 trillion euros of debt, piling up by about 5 grand every second. The deficit is exploding past 5% of GDP, borrowing costs are at a 14-year high, and their finance minister is even whispering the unthinkable, an IMF bailout. Factories are shuttering, nuclear plants are desperate for uranium after Niger slammed the door, and the once proud empire now looks like a wounded beast scrambling to hold onto its old colonies. Meanwhile, Senegal is thriving. Oil from Sangomar, gas from the GTA project, plus a surge in exports have the economy growing at double digits. Let's be clear, France needs Senegal's oil, fish, and phosphate a lot more than Senegal needs French investment. So why is President Bassirou Diomaye Faye acting like Paris is still the master? At the MEDEF Business Summit, he practically begged French companies to flood into Senegal's market. That's not sovereignty, that's the old colonial playbook dressed up as partnership. And then there's the CFA franc. Faye campaigned on tearing up this colonial currency that forces African nations to stash reserves in Paris and keeps their economies chained to French policy. He promised alternatives. A new regional currency, even a national one. But after nearly a year in office? Nothing. Not a timeline, not a plan, not even a whisper. Instead, he's in Paris smiling for cameras. That silence isn't strategy. It's surrender. And don't forget the military angle. Faye announced French bases would close, but behind the scenes he's doubling down on security cooperation. Training programs, maritime patrols, cyber defense, exactly the cover France has used in Mali and the Central African Republic to keep control without the uniforms. Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré warned about this trick and tore up the agreements. Faye? He's keeping the leash intact. So here's the real question. Is Bassirou Diomaye Faye selling out Senegal's sovereignty? Or is he just another politician who said whatever it took to win power? France loves to talk about partnership, but history shows what that really means, control. From Operation Barkhane in Mali to Sangaris in the Central African Republic, Military agreements have always been France's excuse to intervene. Closing bases in Senegal looked bold on paper, but without tearing up those agreements, it's just trimming weeds. As Ibrahim Traoré put it, if you don't kill the root, it grows back stronger. And the cracks in Senegal aren't just with France, they're inside the government itself. The alliance between President Faye and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko is collapsing. Remember, Sonko was the firebrand who gave Faye his platform, the voice of Senegal's youth, the man who railed against French control. Now he's openly challenging his own president. At a party meeting, Sonko said bluntly, "I'm calling on President Faye to assume his responsibilities. You have to let me govern." Translation: Sonko feels sidelined, stripped of power, and thrown under the bus. The Sonko dégage protests spreading in Dakar don't look spontaneous. They look like a regime trying to shift blame. And Faye's weak response? A vague line about fighting the problems of the people. That's not leadership, that's evasion. To understand why this hurts so deeply, you have to zoom out. France has spent centuries bleeding West Africa. First the slave trade, then colonial plunder, and today neocolonialism, through the CFA franc, through military bases, through French companies that dominate oil, gas, ports, and uranium. This system keeps African nations exporting raw materials while Paris rakes in the profits. The CFA franc is the linchpin. By pegging currencies to the euro and forcing reserves into Paris, France keeps West Africa dependent and poor. But change is happening. Ibrahim Traoré in BurkinaFaso showed what rupture really looks like. Expel French troops, shred the military deals, reclaim resources. He even nationalized gold mines, boosting state revenues and clawing back territory from jihadists. That's why he's become a Pan-Africanist icon. And that's the contrast staring Senegal in the face. Traoré is cutting chains while Faye is polishing them. So here's the question. Will Faye rise to the promise of sovereignty, or will history remember him as the man who handed Senegal back to Paris? Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso isn't just talking Pan-Africanism, he's living it. He built a gold refinery so the country processes its own resources, pushed domestic farming to fight food insecurity, and even turned a rundown canal in Ouagadougou into a public hub. His slogan, Africa for Africans, isn't empty rhetoric, it's policy in action. And Burkina Faso isn't alone. Mali's Assimi Goïta kicked out French troops and forced new terms on mining deals. Niger's Abdourahamane Tiani shut down France's uranium pipeline, leaving Paris scrambling for supply. Together, they've proven that Africa's resources, gold, uranium, oil, gas, can be weapons of liberation when leaders put their people first. So here's the question. If Traoré, Goita, and Tiani can stand up to France, why is Senegal's Bassirou Diomaye Faye cozying up to Macron? His defenders call it pragmatism. They point to French investment, 270 companies, billions in development loans, 30,000 jobs. But let's be real, that's not partnership. That's the same old colonial bargain, short-term aid in exchange for long-term dependency. Look at the Dakar Niadio Express. Built by a French company, but now Senegal is left holding $150 million in unpaid bills. That's France's playbook. Offer flashy projects, leave behind debt. And Faye seems all in. He's already made 3 trips to France since taking office, pitching Senegal's market at the MEDEF summit like a salesman begging for buyers. Meanwhile, Senegal's debt crisis is spiraling. Hidden liabilities pushed its debt to GDP to nearly 119% in 2024, and the IMF is circling with conditions attached. Instead of breaking free, Faye is walking straight into the trap. And that's the tragedy. Faye doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. Traoré already showed the path. Nationalize resources, end military dependence, invest in local industries. Senegal's oil and gas could power real independence, but only if they're refined and used at home, not shipped out by French firms. The CFA franc could be replaced, but only if Faye actually sets a timeline and follows through. Right now, Senegal stands at a crossroads. It can join the wave of African sovereignty, or sink deeper into France's shadow. And it all comes down to whether Faye chooses courage or compromise. Senegal's people deserve a leader who delivers on his promises, not one who trades their future for a French handshake. They voted for Faye because they saw him as a Traoré, a champion of sovereignty who'd put Senegal first. But his actions suggest he's falling into the old trap, cozying up to the West for short-term gains while sacrificing long-term freedom. The Sonko Dégage movement is a warning shot. Public frustration is brewing, and it's only a matter of time before it turns on Faye. The rift with Sonko is a red flag. If Faye keeps sidelining his Pan-Africanist base, he risks losing the movement that brought him to power. Senegal should demand transparency on Faye's French deals, a concrete plan to exit the CFA franc, and a full end to French military influence. They should expect him to prioritize local control of oil and gas, reject French advisors, and build an economy that serves Senegalese citizens, not Parisian elites. If Faye fails, the streets will speak, as they did during the protests that brought him to power. Faye's flirtation with France is a symptom of a deeper disease. For decades, African leaders have been lured to Paris, offered loans and aid, then locked into deals that drain their nation's wealth. This is why Africa grows slowly. Its resources fuel Western economies while its people get crumbs. France's grip, through the CFA franc, military presence, and corporate dominance, has kept West Africa as a resource colony. Leaders like Faye, who start strong but buckle under Western charm, perpetuate this cycle. But the revolution is alive. Traoré, Goita, and Tiani are proving that Africa can break free. They're not perfect, but they're evidence that sovereignty is possible when leaders prioritize their people. Faye is standing at a crossroads. Will he carve out a path like Ibrahim Traoré, bold, uncompromising, building a Senegal that answers only to its own people? Or will he slide into the role France has written for too many African leaders, just another pawn in their chess game? And this isn't just his choice, it's Senegal's moment too. The same youth who filled the streets chanting "Africa for Africans" need to remind him why he was elected in the first place. This is the time to demand answers. What's the real story behind his French deals? Where's the roadmap to ditch the CFA franc? And why is military cooperation with France still on the table? If Faye dodges these questions, the people can't afford to stay silent. They've proven before that power trembles when the streets speak. The revolution won't be won in fancy photo ops or polite breakfasts at the Élysée. It's won by leaders willing to stand up, like Traoré, and declare without hesitation, "Africa for Africans, full stop." Faye, the clock isn't just ticking, it's deafening. This is your moment of truth. Will you rise and use Senegal's oil, gas, and spirit to build real sovereignty? Or will you sink quietly into the role of caretaker in France's backyard? Africa is watching. Senegal is watching. And this time, no one is blinking.